Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we are going to be painting the awesome Efreet Sword Dancers and Flamecaster miniatures from Conquest by Para-Bellum Games. Para-Bellum was kind enough to send me the starter army for the Sorcerer Kings with their brand new army release, and I'm more than happy to get these painted up on the channel. These miniatures look absolutely amazing. Let me talk a little bit about the kit before we get started. So you're going to have three different bodies, and it's a dual kit. So with those three bodies, you get arm options for the sword dancers. So like this guy, dual wielding scimitars. But then you also get options for the flame casters, where they're kind of like conjuring fireballs. You can mix and match the arms for each particular body. So the arms that go for body A, like what I did with this sword dancer, I gave him one firearm and then one sword arm. You could do some customization like that, and then you get 6 heads in the kit, and the heads can go onto any one of the bodies. So there are some customizations there, but realistically, it really is a monopose kit. However, these poses are absolutely amazing. Now, before we go any further, I do have a very important announcement. So today we're going to be painting, but I've also got a tactics faction review article on my brand new website. That's right, I've finally gone ahead and did it and made a blog site as a companion to the channel. So you can go to jtswargaming.com. Any ideas that I have floating in my head and I just don't have time to record a video, I'm going to be doing blog posts over there. And one of my latest blog posts to kind of help support this whole new Sorcerer Kings release was a faction review of the latest rules update for them. So if you want to learn about the faction and how they work and some high-level analysis of all of the units, definitely go check out jtswargaming.com, and you'll be able to get all that information over there. And one last announcement before we get started: if you are interested in saving 10% off of your Conquest purchases, we are sponsored by Para-Bellum Games, so they have a discount code for us to give to all of you, and that code is JTS Wargaming. You can click the links down in the description of the video, and when you check out, you use that code, you get 10% off of your purchase, and then they actually give us a little bit of income out of that sale. So not only do you get a discount, you get to help support the channel at no additional cost to you. Now that's enough rambling and sales pitching. Let's actually start talking about how we're going to paint these miniatures. So, to get everything prepped, I went ahead and gave everything a gray prime, and then all of the flame areas I went ahead and covered with white ink through the airbrush. I specifically used the Scale 75 Inktense White, but any artist acrylic white ink would do the job. I've used Liquitex in the past. That works a treat. You could also use an artist titanium white paint, acrylic paint, to get really nice white coverage on those flames. So the where we're going to start are with the lower body flames, and in this video I'm going to show you guys 2 different ways that you can paint fire. The lower body is going to be slightly more complex. We're going to do what I guess I'm going to call inverted layering. So we're going to want light colors down in the shadows, and then we're going to work our way down to the darker colors, which are going to be on the more raised areas where you would traditionally be doing a highlight. And that's just a stylized way of showing the fire is hotter internally, and then it's transitioning to smoke as you move further away from the heat source. So let's get started with that process. All right, so to start out with, we're going to go to the Vallejo model color yellow fluorescent. So this is a very thick paint. The medium that they use is not diluted very much. So you want to put a metal ball bearing in here and give it a good shake. If it comes out clear with like little flecks of color, you need to mix it a little bit more. So to see what this is supposed to look like, we'll just put a strip down on the palette. And that's about the consistency that you want to shoot for. And with this, all we're going to do is paint this into all of the recessed areas of the flames. And there's no need to be neat here. We are going to be covering quite a bit of this up. In the final result, there's going to be very little of this actually showing. But just very quickly go ahead and get this into all of your recessed areas. All right, and so with that fluorescent yellow applied, and it's still a little wet, these fluorescent colors take a little bit longer to dry, which is going to work in our favor. We're going to quickly move over to orange fluorescent from Vallejo model color, and anything that we've not covered with the fluorescent yellow, we're going to cover with the fluorescent orange. And when we get to those fluorescent yellow spots, we do kind of want to run a little bit of the orange into the yellow, and we will smooth out the transitions in the next step. But for right now, we just want to get the majority of that white covered. So now that we've got all of that fluorescent orange applied, we've got a flaming hot mess. Just wanted to note, like where the orange started running into the yellow, I stippled so that it wasn't a clean line left behind. And now we're going to kind of blend these two areas together. So what I've got over on the wet palette is a nice big dollop of the fluorescent yellow and a dollop of the orange. And we're going to take a little bit of speed paint medium, and we're going to make a very thin sort of glaze out of the yellow. And we're going to mix just a touch of the orange into it. And this will thin this down into a really bright yellow-orange. And we're going to cover all of the flame area. And glazing in this way will help blend those transitions and break up any harsh lines that happen to be left. So you could do the old hand test to see how translucent it is. And we need just a little bit more speed paint medium here. There we go. And now we're literally just going to slap this all over the flames. And now that that layer is almost dry, you can see we're not going for perfectly blended because fire is somewhat random. So a perfect transition isn't really necessary, but it does help to break up some of the harsh lines and get that fiery hot core of the fire looking pretty good. So now we're going to work on transitioning the higher points of the flame to smoke, and we're going to switch up and we're going to dry brush over top of this, and let's get started. All right, so we're going to be working in the Artis Opus sort of style of dry brushing. Now, his kits, while they're extremely high quality, they are a little expensive. So if you're looking to mimic his style with the semi-wet dry brushing, but you don't want to throw down, over $100 for a set. This Artify set off of Amazon gets you pretty much everything you need. So it comes with 5 different sizes of dry brushes. I've already got the 2 I'm going to use out of here. But then you've also got your brush cleaner, which is awesome. And then you've also got your moisture sponge holder, which you'll need to follow his technique. So let's go ahead and get started dry brushing. So the very first colors that we're going to use is we're going to be mixing Scale 75 Mars Orange with Scale 75 Blood Red. Alright, so I'm working with the size 7 brush from the set, and we'll just dip that in the moisture pad, check the moisture level on the back of our hand, and then we're going to spread out a nice bit of this Mars Orange and just add a touch of the blood red into it and get a nice dark orangey red color. And very lightly, we're going to flick this over the raised areas of the flames. And you don't want a whole lot of pressure, because you don't want it to go too far into the recesses. But we are going to cover up the majority of that orange. Right, so here we are with that mix all applied. Now we're going to invert the mix and do majority blood red, and then just a small touch of that Mars orange. And get most of that off the brush, check the hand. And now we're going to go with an even lighter touch, and we're really focusing on the raised edges and not so much the recesses here. Right, so now we're going to introduce Scale 75 Deep Red. Right, so very similar to what we did with the Mars Orange and the Blood Red, we're going to do with Blood Red and Deep Red. So we're going to take majority Deep Red and just a touch of the Blood Red to get slightly darker step in our transitions, and do the old hand test. And again, even lighter touch, which is really focused on those raised areas. Very little pressure. And if there's anywhere that you have like an especially harsh transition, you can apply a little bit more focus there. And then also any part of the fire that's in shadow, you can go a little bit heavier in those areas. And it's okay that we're brushing up against the clothes. We're going to cover all of that later. All right, so now we're going to switch it up, and we're going to go majority Deep Red with just a touch of Blood Red mixed in. And get a little bit of the hand test going. And again, an even lighter touch this time, really focused on the peaks of any wispy smoke and the shadow areas. And then if there's any sort of large areas where maybe you've got too much of the fluorescent showing, you can stipple this into those areas and help break it up. And you won't completely cover the fluorescent, so you'll still have that bright light effect, but you can break it up, and it'll end up looking more like embers. So now we're going to introduce some black And this is what's going to really make that smoky texture really come through for us. So similar deals before. We're going to go majority dark red, or deep red rather, and just a touch of the black mixed in. A very nice dark red. And get most of that off. A little hand test. And now here we want to be very, very careful. We're really concentrating on those peaks. You don't want any of this down in your recesses. So that fire is really starting to come together. And so for our last dry brushing step, we're also switching down to the size 5 brush. We want to be somewhat targeted with this. And we're going to go majority black with just a touch of that deep red. And here we're really, really targeting on those crests and peaks. Can be a little heavier in the shadows. And every so often it helps to sort of pull away from the miniature and spin it around. See if there's any areas that don't look quite right to the eye. So just a few more steps now to finish off this style of fire. So we still got a lot of the orange kind of showing through, and it's sort of overpowering everything. So we're going to take a little bit of the deep red, turn it into a glaze, and then glaze over everything but the very center of the recesses. So to do this, we're just going to use a little bit of the deep red. Then I've got some Liquitex matte medium that I've already thinned down. And we're going to start out with a 10-to-1 mix. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And mix this thoroughly. And this should get us a pretty thin consistency. There we go on the back of my hand, so you guys can kind of see how thin that is. Now, we don't want to load our brush up too much. That's plenty right there. And then all we're going to do is run this over pretty much everything except for the yellow hot center of all of the recesses. This will just help blend everything together and tone down some of that excessive orange. And with that glaze applied, you can see we've now got everything toned down a little bit more color appropriate and smoothed out some of that harshness of that underlying orange. So now the final detail, we're going to break out the scale 75 Tenere yellow, and we're going to dip down to a smaller brush, breaking out the Monument 0, and what we're going to do is add some points of light around the flames. So places where it makes sense to do this, you can add some dots inside of the already super bright yellow areas. And these will just sort of be like really dark, or not really dark, really bright, parts of that center of the fire. And then you can also add a little bit of this, just very tiny dots along some of the darker raised areas, and it'll kind of look like embers that are burning in the smoke. And be somewhat sparing with this. You can always add more if you feel like it needs it. But it is very easy to kind of overdo this effect. So just take your time and every now and again sort of reassess the model as a whole and kind of see where you're at. So now that we've got the flames for the lower half of the body done, we're going to move on to the second method, and we're going to do the little fireball effect here and then the flames along the swords. So for this, we're going to do a little bit of wet on wet blending right on the model using some speed paint. So if you're a speed paint fan, I've got you covered rather. So we're going to start out with Imperial Fist Yellow from Citadel Contrast Paint. Then we're going to move into Magma Drop Flame for our orange tone, Ball Red for our red tone, and then for the smoky bits, we're going to go to Black Templar. So we're going to try and do this all in one shot. So we're going to get some Imperial Fist Yellow, and we're going to get the fire that's essentially the hottest. So at the hand where he's conjuring it. And then we're going to take this back about a third of the way down the flame. So about this point here. And we do need to move somewhat quickly with this, because we need to be able to work this while it's wet. And the longer drying time of contrast paint will help us out. So now we're going to move on to the magma drops. And we're going to go about 2/3 down. And start applying this. And as we approach that yellow, we're going to stipple this into it to start our blend. And then now, since we've started the blending process, we're not going to go back into the pot. We're going to grab some of this Dorn or Imperial Fish Yellow that I've got on my palette already, and we're going to stipple that into the red over that join and kind of move that around, and that's going to mix our lighter orange tone right on the mini. No extra work required. Now, while that's settling down a little bit, we're going to move on to our ball red and get the remainder tail of the flame. And just like we did with the orange and the yellow, when we get to the join with the orange, we're going to stipple this in. And then for the reverse stipple, we're going to go to the magma droth that's already on the palette and stipple that into the red. All right, now we're going to switch to a smaller brush and take our Black Templar and then start applying this toward the tails of any smoky bits. Then going back to our larger brush, we're going to get just a little bit of that ball red and kind of start stippling over those areas where we just applied that Black Templar and kind of moving this around. And we're going to do one more pass with the Imperial Fist Yellow at the front. And so before we can continue, we're going to go ahead and let that dry. So all of the contrast paints are mostly dry. And so we've got this nice smooth gradient from yellow into the orange, into the red, and then into a darker reddish black. Now, you could stop there, but to tie this flame into the lower body flame, I'm going to dry brush over it, very similar to how we did in our previous step. But I'm just going to skip ahead to our deep red mixed with a little black. We don't need to go through the the multi-stage dry brushing that we did before. So we've got our slightly moistened dry brush, and we're going to go about 50-50 with the black and deep red. And now we're going to start from the back of the flame and lightly dry brush. And as you're depositing most of the paint in the darker area, you're then going to move forward into the reds and the oranges. And we want to bring it slightly into the yellow, but not all the way. And we're not actually going to touch the sword. One, the flames there are really, really tiny. But then two, I actually quite like the vibrancy that we have there. Kind of helps that detail stand out. So we're not going to touch the sword. But there we've got our dry brush flames. And now for the final detail on the fire, we're coming back in with Teneri Yellow. And we're going to do the hottest part of the flame that's near the hand. And kind of just stipple this all over to make it really, really bright. And make it really stand out. And we're going to carry this back just a little bit into the fire trail. And just like we did previously, we can also use the Teneri Yellow to add in some burning embers by just placing some dots. And then lastly, we're going to mix in a little bit of scale 75 white into the Teneri Yellow and do some lighting effects inside the Teneri Yellow we just placed. So again, you'll want to be very sparing with this. This is really just adding embers to the yellow bits. So brace yourself and just add some dots inside those previous Teneri Yellow areas. Alright, so here's the finished model, guys, just so that you can kind of see both of the fire effects, and actually I guess technically it's 3 different fire effects, and how they, all go together with the rest of the mini. So down here at the bottom again, we've got the sort of traditional layering and glazing. Then up here we have some dry brushing over some speed paint. And then over here we've just got the speed paint with nothing else done to it. So I had a lot of fun painting this miniature. It was a little bit of a challenge kind of figuring out the colors I wanted to use, because I typically paint more sci-fi than I do fantasy, and on top of that, I almost never really work with yellows and oranges or even reds, honestly, all that often. So it was a fun little project. If you guys have questions about how I painted the rest of the mini, let me know down below. I still have the rest of his compatriots that need to be painted, so I could do an additional video on these guys before I move on to some of the heroes for the Sorcerer Kings. Also, I want to give a massive shout out to our channel member, Mr. Roland Lucas. As always, you rock. If you want to help out the channel, hit that subscribe button down at the bottom and click the notification bell. Make sure you like the video. And if you want to go a little bit further, we accept donations through the YouTube channel memberships, just like Mr. Roland Lucas. You can click that join button, and all of those funds go into supporting the channel, getting new equipment, model cost, and so forth. And anything that comes my way is greatly appreciated. But that's all I've got for today, guys. I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Make sure you keep it locked here for the next couple of weeks. We're going to be focusing on the Sorcerer Kings, and I'll see you in the next video.